Charlotte, people protested all weekend against the Republicans in their convention. They cussed out President Trump, who spent his summer casting doubt on the safety and security of mail-in voting, a tactic that skates awfully close to voter suppression. But here in North Carolina, there's already another kind of suppression that's become synonymous with the state: gerrymandering.
So we are in the Catawba neighborhood, and it is one of the neighborhoods that was actually split in half by gerrymandering back in 2010.
Remapping electoral districts is meant to happen every 10 years. It's tied to the census and population growth.
So literally my district starts with that green box and goes that way, but just on that side of the street.
This is the corner right here.
Exactly.
Gerrymandering is drawing a district to get more favorable results for one party.
If we walk across, we'll be back in your district over here.
Democrat Chaz Beasley's district's been redrawn 5 times in 10 years.
Not my district, it gets confusing.
Yeah.
So
North Carolina, a state with a plurality of registered Democrats, has had 10 years of a Republican-controlled legislature, and districts here were regularly shaped and reshaped to keep it that way.
So what district do you represent now?
So I still represent the number District 92, but they just changed it, so it moved further south.
How is that going to affect us as voters, though?
Now you're going to have a totally different group of folks representing you.
It's gotten so out of hand, even some Republicans think it's time for change.
I've always heard every 4 years, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And after the last 4 years, I think more than ever that 2020 actually is.
Emmanuel Jarvis is GOP chair of Durham County, the largest in the state.
As a Republican in this state, what is your approach to forming these districts?
There should be an algorithm that is bipartisan, that does not look at anything at all but the population and the state of North Carolina and cut them up equally to make sure there's representation. And however it falls, it falls.
Even if you guys potentially lost some seats?
It is what it is. I personally, again, I can't speak for anyone else, but it may be that way, that we may lose seats. I mean, if you look at the population of North Carolina, there are more Democrats that live in North Carolina than Republicans, and then you have your independents in there as well. So when people come to us and say, how is it possible that you have so many seats? We have to realize one of the reasons Republicans were asked, hey, we want to make sure that blacks and African Americans are represented and they have their own people if they want to choose in their district. So when you do that, that means that you're clumping people together and there is a net loss of how many Democrats are actually going to be seated because of that.
The point of gerrymandering might be to win elections, but the long game is to change laws. In North Carolina, that's meant pushing through overt voter suppression laws, like those requiring signature matching and witnesses. These could actually stop people's votes from counting this November.
What we are witnessing is a voter suppression war machine like we have never seen before in this country, where they are deploying 50,000 people at the polls and countless resources, $20 million from the RNC in court, to simply make voting harder.
Mark Elias is the Democrats' go-to litigator. He's handling dozens of cases that challenge the Republican efforts to make voting more difficult. He says he'll be closely watching how North Carolina handles this election.
You know, the reason why we have terrible gerrymandering in North Carolina is for the same reasons that they have relatively restricted voting laws. So first of all, it's an important state just electorally, so there'll be a lot of energy there. Number two, you have a Republican legislature that has been one of the worst legislatures on passing anti-voting legislation, right? These are the folks who passed legislation that was struck down by the federal courts as targeting African Americans with, quote, surgical precision. So it's not exactly a voter-friendly legislature.
For Beasley, a voter-friendly legislature is by definition a representative one.
How do you see the gerrymandering of North Carolina factoring into the way that this presidential election is going to go in November?
I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have here in North Carolina is that a lot of people have been convinced that their vote does not matter. And I think gerrymandering plays into that. But I also think that one of the things we're seeing now is that a lot of people are understanding the important stakes in this election, but they're also understanding that it's not just about who's in the White House, it's about who's holding the person in the White House accountable. And there's been a severe lack of accountability. Some Republicans refuse to say anything to oppose the president in any way. And I think that's the reason why you're starting to see a lot of voters. We saw this in 2018. I think we're going to see this this year, where a lot of voters are saying to their specific member of Congress, we are going to vote you out because we do not like the way that you've been running the show and the fact that you've been lacking accountability for the current president.
Are there Democrats who try those kinds of tactics?
I've had some people that have come up to me and said, well, when y'all, meaning many Democrats, when y'all were running the show, y'all gerrymandered too. True. The last time the Democrats wrote the lines, I was in high school. So I tell people, look, I don't have a vested interest in what happened 20 years ago when Democrats were drawing the lines. I have a vested interest in making sure that we take this out of the hands of politicians of both parties and have an independent redistricting commission that is comprised of Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated voters that can make decisions that create as many competitive districts as possible, that create a level playing field. So did Democrats gerrymander in the past? Yes, they did. Are Republicans gerrymandering now? Yes, they are. Does that mean that we need to somehow, once we get back into control, just do the exact same thing and get back into this terrible cycle? No, it means we need to stop the cycle.